kids, we're going to read Library Mouse, A Friend's Tale by Daniel Kirk. Sam was a library mouse. He lived in a little hole in a wall behind the children's reference books. Sam loved to read, and he loved to write too. Everyone loved his little books, but Sam was very shy, and no one at the library ever met him. One week, the children at the library met for the Writers and Illustrators Club. For our next project, said Mrs. Forrester, the librarian, I would like all the boys and girls to work with a partner. One of you will be the author, and the other will be the illustrator. You will find out how teamwork can make a great book. At the end of the meeting, there was one child left standing all by himself. Don't worry, Tom, said Mrs. Forrester. I will be happy to work with you. When night came, Sam, the library mouse, went to do some research for a story he was planning to write. All night long he studied, jotted things down in his notebook, but as the sun rose, his eyelids grew very heavy and he fell asleep. Squeak! Sam awoke with a start as children filled into the classroom. In his hurry to escape, he left his little notebook behind. Tom discovered it on the librarian's desk. Carefully, he opened the cover and turned the pages, and then he went to tug at Mrs. Forrester's sleeve. What's this? Asked the librarian, flipping through the notebook. From the titles of the stories in here, I guess this belongs to Sam, our mystery author. He's written so many wonderful books, yet we've never had the pleasure of meeting him. Let's put it back on your desk, said Tom, so Sam can find it. That night, Sam climbed into the librarian's desk to look for his notebook. As he hurried back across the desk with his prize in his arms, the mouse stepped across an ink pad and left. What did he leave here?
Footprints.
Yes, a trail of footprints. Good morning, Mrs. Forrester said to Tom when he arrived early the next day. Did you bring some ideas for a story that we can work on together? Not yet, said Tom. And then he noticed the inky marks on the librarian's desk and saw that Sam's notebook was gone. Impossible, he thought. When he was sure no one was looking, Tom got down on his hands and knees and he peered under the library shelf around the baseboards, not quite certain what he was looking for. Suddenly, he saw a little hole in the wall, and now he knew why Sam always wanted to write about mice. Tom tore a piece of cheese from the snack he had brought and left it by the opening. Oh no, Sam cried when he stepped out of his hole that night and saw the cheese. Who could have left that? He wondered. What do they want? Sam thought it might be best to leave the cheese alone and pretend like he never saw it. The next time Sam came to the library, he found the cheese looking dry and lonely, just where he had left it. He placed a peanut butter cracker. Maybe he will like this better, thought Sam. Indeed, when Sam woke and smelled the cracker, it was all he could not to gobble up the treat. Clearly, someone had discovered his hole. Sam hoped that if he ignored the food, whoever it was would go away and forget about him. But Tom did not forget about him. He thought about writing a letter to the library mouse, but he wasn't sure what to say, and then he got an idea. He sat down and started to write a story, and it was called The Shy One, and this is how it began. Once upon a time, there was someone who was very shy. His name was Sam. People seemed to make him nervous. The children at the library knew what Sam was like because of the books he wrote, but nobody really knew who Sam was. And that seemed to suit him just fine, until one day. When he finished writing, Tom folded up the paper and left it just outside the little hole in the wall. That night, Sam read the story from beginning to end. Tom had discovered the one thing Sam could not resist, a story. Sam grinned. He remembered Tom as a regular at the library. I've got an idea, he said to himself, and he went to his hole and got to work. When Tom arrived later that week for Writers and Illustrators Club, he felt a little guilty. He'd been so busy thinking about Sam that he had forgotten about his assignment. He got down on his hands and knees to look beneath the reference books. The paper he had left was gone, and then he heard the librarian's voice. Tom, what's this I found on my desk? I thought you decided not to write a book this week, and then I found The Shy One, written by you and illustrated by Sam. I can't wait to share it with the group. Oh no, thought Tom. The story he had written had just been meant for Sam to see. What if Sam had drawn a boy and a mouse? If Mrs. Forrester read it out loud, everyone would find out who Sam really was. And then what? Someone might try to hurt him or chase him away. Please don't read the story, Mrs. Forrester, Tom pleaded. You should be proud of your work, the librarian said kindly. Now, how wonderful that you did a book together. I can't wait to hear more about who Sam really is. When everyone was seated, Mrs. Forrester held up the little book. She began to read. Once upon a time, there was someone who was very shy, and his name was Sam. People seemed to make him nervous. The children at the library knew what Sam was like because of the books he wrote. Nobody really knew who Sam was, and it seemed to suit him just fine. Until one day, someone discovered Sam's secret. It was a good thing. He only wanted to be Sam's friend. This page now says, "Come on, Sam," it said to Tom. "Let's do it together." And they did. Mrs. Forrester read the story from beginning to end, and Tom was amazed to see the pictures that Sam had drawn. The illustrations showed 2 mice instead of 1, and one of them was named Tom. "So tell us," said Mrs. Forrester, "who is this Sam who writes about so many books? I just have to ask you. Is it you?" "Oh, no," said Tom with a shy smile. "I just wrote the story. Sam is real, but he likes his privacy, so that's all I'm going to say. A friend knows how to keep a secret." When the library was ready to close, and Tom was sure no one was watching, he bent over to place something on the floor beneath the children's reference books. Sam awoke that night to find a note. "Thanks, partner. Great work. Your friend, Tom." Sam sat down at his desk. He had an idea of his own story about friends. He couldn't wait for Tom to read it, and maybe this time his new friend would draw the pictures. The end.